Hello, this is your special education virtual content specialist here with the guide for middle school lessons for March 1st. Before we begin, I want to remind you that all of these lessons can be found in TeachHub and that each lesson comes with a instructional and technology guidance, implementation for each slide of the lesson, guidance for summarizing, guidance for assessment during instruction, and general engagement tips for students with disabilities and multilingual learners. So let's dive in to the 6th grade lesson. 6th grade is going to be working in Unit 6, Expressions and Equations, Day 17. Equivalent exponential expressions. How can we carry out operations in a conventional order when we evaluate expressions that have a variable, an exponent, and one other operation? In the launch, students are expected to find values of 3 to the x power and 1/3 to the x power for different values of x. The secondary portion is what patterns do you notice? As a scaffold, you can pre-fill each column of the table with a value or two values, as noted here. 3 to the x power, in which x is equal to 2, is 9, and 1/3 to the x power, in which x is equal to 3, is 1/27. And for the secondary portion, you can provide students a sentence starter so they can focus more on the noticing rather than on sentence structure. For the exploration, it can be differentiated into a more explicit instruction. So here is an I do, where you show students how to evaluate each expression, and notice that each expression has a coefficient of 3. We do, in which you have the students guide you in evaluating each expression for the given value of x and noticing what the coefficient is. And lastly, having the students themselves find the value of each expression and answering in each expression what is the coefficient. Lastly, in the explore, you can have the students choose one of the expressions, either from the I do, the we do, or the you do. That way, if they are struggling with thinking about the steps, they can look at the I do or we do that had teacher support to answer this question. Secondly, they are answering how is evaluating the expressions when x is a fraction similar to when x is a whole number, and how is it different. Here provided are some sentence starters. Again, we want students to focus more on the similarities and differences rather than thinking about sentence structure. And the same goes for the summary. We want students to answer, how can we carry out operations in a conventional order when we evaluate expressions that have a variable, an exponent, and one other operation? You may also want to have students go back through the slides. That way they can get all the possible knowledge from the lesson to answer this question. Highlight to students that are having difficulty this support video. And lastly, for additional practice, you can have students engage in low, middle, or high activities from Kahoot, practice problems from Open Up Resources, or Engage New York. Now let's take a look at the 7th grade lessons. For 7th grade, they're working on Unit 7, Angles, Triangles, and Prisms. Day 1 is Relationship of Angles, Part 1. How can we describe special angles? The launch has students examining angles, which angle is bigger, and explaining your reasoning. So as part of the differentiation, students can easily say which angle they chose, and a sentence starter, the angle I chose is bigger because, and we want them to focus on that content. The exploration is mostly providing students information about what makes up an angle and how to name an angle. And here they have to make some noticings. During this slide of the exploration, I highly suggest that students get guidance from the teacher and have the teacher model which is angle A and why you can't just say angle A in this particular diagram. Here we have a question that says, we call angles DAC and CAB adjacent angles. What do they have in common that makes them adjacent? Which angle is bigger, angle CAB or angle BAC? Here we're going to provide more students information with the definition of adjacent angles, and then we're going to end the exploration with what is an acute angle and what is an obtuse angle. And as additional support, here we have the definition of acute and obtuse angles. And here we're going to have the students summarize. Here is a Khan Academy for additional support for students who need it. And here we have a low and medium high activities from Khan Academy and Open Up resources. Now let's take a look at the 8th grade lesson. In 8th grade, they're in Unit 6, Associations and Data. Day 19, using data displays to find associations, Part A. How can we use frequency tables and segmented bar graphs to look at data? Here is the launch in which students must fill out information from the survey or a aforementioned survey using the information provided. And once they finish slide A, here are sentence supports. That way students can focus on what percentage of students play a sport who don't play a musical instrument and students who don't play a sport and also don't play a musical instrument. In the Explore, I highly suggest making slides C and D and I do. That way students can understand how to make a two-way table by row and a segmented bar graph. In the You Do, have students recognize that they're doing relative frequencies by columns and that their segmented bar graph will be based off of that. And here are 2 sentence starters that students can use depending on what their answer is for this question. Do you think there is an association between playing a sport and playing a musical instrument? They're going to summarize their answer to the question, how can we use frequency tables and segmented bar graphs to look at data? And here is a support video from Khan Academy, and here are some activities that they can do to continue practicing from Khan Academy, Open Up Resources, and Engage New York. And as with every lesson, here are the resource citations, and you can always look at these resources. That way you can look at what students should be doing at various grade levels. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to the virtual content specialist.